Welcome to our deep dive, and this time it's on minimal APIs in .NET 8. You've been sending in some material, looks like you're trying to get a grip on this new way of building web services.
Right. And it's a pretty exciting time to be digging into this stuff. Minimal APIs, they're definitely having a moment.
Yeah, they are.
There's a lot of buzz, but there's some real substance behind it too.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to break it all down. What makes this approach so different, why it's got people talking,
Yeah.
and how you can actually use it in your own projects.
Going from like pages of code down to something much simpler, it sounds kind of too good to be true.
Right.
Is it really possible to build like robust applications with this whole minimalist approach?
That's the question everyone's asking, and the sources that you sent in are a great way to explore it.
Yeah.
So maybe a good place to start is like with the why behind minimal APIs. Why is there this shift in thinking about web service development?
Okay, so let's unpack that minimal idea then. Is it just like a trendy name, or is there actually a real change happening in how we think about building these services?
It's definitely more than just a catchy name. I think
Okay.
minimal APIs are really a response to the increasing complexity that we see in software development these days. And we're seeing that not just in .NET 8, but other frameworks as well.
Right.
And the goal is to simplify things without sacrificing power or flexibility.
The sources I sent over mentioned terms like efficiency and performance. I mean, as a developer,
Yeah.
I imagine those words are like music to your ears when you're trying to meet deadlines and all that.
Absolutely. So by reducing the amount of boilerplate code, minimal APIs let you focus on the core logic of your service.
Right.
Think of it as like streamlining your workflow.
Yeah.
And less code often translates to faster execution times, which can have a big impact on performance.
Yeah, that makes sense. But doesn't stripping away all that code mean that you lose flexibility?
Yeah.
What if you need to build something more complex than just a basic service?
That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
The minimal aspect doesn't actually mean limited functionality.
Okay.
It's more about a shift in how that functionality is expressed,
Right.
going for a more concise and focused syntax.
Okay.
You can still achieve the same outcomes, but with a more streamlined approach.
Let's move from theory to practice then. The source material had that classic hello world example, and I have to admit, it's surprisingly short.
Yeah, it's quite striking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even if you're relatively new to .NET, the syntax is designed to be readable and approachable,
Yeah.
so we can walk through it line by line to see just how straightforward it is.
What really stood out to me was how the entire application is set up. It felt minimal.
Exactly. And with minimal APIs, you often find the entire setup within the program.cs file.
Yeah.
No need for separate controllers or complex routing configurations or bulky startup classes.
Oh, wow.
It's a much more consolidated approach.
It almost seems too simple.
No.
Is that really all it takes to get a basic web service up and running?
That's the beauty of it. You've hit the nail on the head. It's
Yeah.
eliminating unnecessary ceremony and getting straight to the essence of what your service needs to accomplish.
Wow. Okay, but a hello world example only gets you so far. The source material also included a book service example, and that felt much closer to something you might actually see in a real-world project.
Yeah, absolutely. The book service is a great stepping stone to see how minimal APIs handle elements like data access and dependency injection,
Right.
concepts that are fundamental to building robust applications.
I noticed there was an iBook service interface and a book service class. What's the rationale behind that separation?
Yeah, that's a great example of good software design principles in action.
Okay.
So the interface acts as a contract outlining the methods and properties you'll use to interact with your book data,
Okay.
and then the concrete class provides the actual implementation details.
Got it.
And that separation makes your code more modular, easier to test, and less brittle when changes are needed.
They even use the analogy of a well-organized digital library, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's like having your own kind of curated collection of code for your project.
Exactly. It's all about providing structure and clarity within your code base. And this becomes even more valuable as your project grows in size and complexity.
And then there was that line with add singleton. What was happening there?
That's where dependency injection comes into play.
Okay.
Basically, we're telling .NET, hey, whenever someone needs an iBook service, provide them with an instance of our book service class.
Okay, so it's like setting up the plumbing behind the scenes so that any part of our application can access the book data without us having to manually make those connections every time.
That's a great way to put it. Dependency injection handles those intricate connections for you,
Right.
leading to cleaner, more maintainable, and more testable code.
Awesome. The source then showed how to actually fetch those books, both a list of all books and a specific book by its ID. I was really impressed by how concise those endpoint definitions were, it felt really efficient.
That's one of the big appeals of minimal APIs.
Yeah.
You define roots and their associated logic in a compact, readable manner,
Yeah.
offered directly within those mapget or maphost calls. It's all about cutting down on unnecessary verbosity.
I noticed they use something called type results. Is that a feature specific to minimal APIs?
Type results is a feature that helps ensure type safety and predictable API responses.
Okay.
While it's not exclusive to minimal APIs, it's frequently used in this context
Okay.
to clearly define what type of data your endpoints will return.
Got it.
And that helps to prevent errors and makes your API easier to consume by other applications.
And what about all those references to Swagger documentation? I kept seeing lines with name and with OpenAPI. What's the story there?
That's fantastic. For anyone who needs to document and share their APIs, which is pretty much standard practice these days.
Yeah.
Minimal APIs make it incredibly easy to integrate with Swagger, now known as OpenAPI, which is like the industry standard for API documentation.
Right.
So these annotations allow you to provide rich descriptions, example data, and even interactive testing capabilities right within your API documentation.
So it's like building a user-friendly guide for your API, but in an automated way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty slick.
Good documentation can make all the difference when you're working with APIs, and minimal APIs bake it right in.
Right.
And speaking of baking things in, this is where things get even more interesting. The source that you provided walked through that all-important program.cs file, and it's really quite amazing to see how everything comes together so neatly in one place.
Yeah, I was drawn to that part. It was like seeing the blueprint for the entire application laid out in a clear and concise way.
It really does highlight that unified structure that minimal APIs are known for. You have your service setup, your middleware configuration, and your endpoint definitions all streamlined within a single file,
Yeah.
which makes it super easy to understand the flow of your application and to make changes as needed.
The source used an analogy of the program.cs file being like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure that everything plays together harmoniously. It really painted a vivid picture in my mind.
It's a perfect analogy. It emphasizes how program.cs orchestrates the entire flow of your minimal API, despite its apparent simplicity.
Right.
So let's break this file down piece by piece to get a better understanding of its inner workings.
Okay, so right at the top, those using statements caught my eye. What's their purpose?
Yeah, so those using statements are like gathering the essential tools for a project.
Okay.
They bring in namespaces, which are essentially organized collections of classes and functions.
Right.
For example, Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.HTTP. HTTP results equips us with convenient methods for defining HTTP responses, like those familiar OK or not found status codes.
Got it. So it's like setting up our workspace and making sure we have all the right components at our fingertips before we start building.
Precisely. And next, we encounter those familiar lines, web application.create, builder and builder, build. This is where the magic happens. We're initializing our application and getting it ready to handle incoming requests. It's like laying the foundation for our structure.
Then there's a whole section about adding services to the container. What's the significance of that?
Ah, yes. This is a crucial part. This is where we register the components our application relies on to function correctly.
Okay.
We're essentially informing .NET. Hey, we'll need an instance of iBook service later on, so please make sure it's available when we need it. This is where dependency injection really shines. Imagine you're building a house.
Right.
You wouldn't want to create every single nail and plank of wood from scratch, would you?
Right. Yeah.
Dependency injection is like having a well-stocked lumber yard where you can easily access the pre-built components you need.
And that's where our trusty book service enters the picture, right?
Exactly. We use builder.services.add_singleton to register our book service class as the implementation for the iBook service interface.
Okay.
This essentially tells .NET. When someone asks for an iBook service, hand them a book service. It's like assigning a specific tool to a particular task.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. What about those lines that mentioned add endpoints API Explorer and add SwaggerGen? They sound a bit more technical.
Those are all about making our API discoverable and well-documented.
Okay.
Add endpoints API Explorer helps .NET automatically understand our endpoints, while Add SwaggerGen sets up the integration with Swagger, which, as we discussed earlier, generates interactive documentation for our API.
Right.
It's like creating a detailed map that guides others through the landscape of our application.
So it's like having a self-generating user manual for our API. That's incredibly convenient.
Absolutely. Good documentation is essential, and minimal APIs make it remarkably simple. Now, after setting up the services, we bring our application to life with var app builder Build.
Oh,
This is where we move from preparation to action.
like flipping the switch and powering up our minimal API.
Great analogy. Next, we delve into the middleware configuration section. This is where we could add layers of functionality to our application.
That sounds like it could get quite complex. What exactly is middleware?
Middleware can be thought of as a series of components that process incoming HTTP requests and outgoing responses.
Okay.
They act like a chain of filters, each with a specific responsibility. Imagine a conveyor belt in a factory.
Right.
Each station along the belt performs a specific operation on the product as it passes through. Middleware works in a similar way, handling tasks like logging, authentication, error handling, and much more.
So each piece of middleware gets its chance to examine and potentially modify the request before it reaches our actual endpoint logic.
You got it.
Okay.
In this specific example, we have app.use status code pages to manage HTTP status codes gracefully, and app. Use HTTPS redirection to ensure that all communication happens over a secure connection.
Right.
These are fundamental building blocks for a robust and reliable web service.
I see a conditional block checking for app.environment.isDevelopment. What's the purpose of that?
That's a clever way to include specific middleware or functionality only when we're in a development environment. In this case, it activates Swagger UI, which provides a visually appealing web interface to interact with and test our API documentation. It's like having a set of specialized debugging tools that are only available during the construction phase.
So these tools help us fine-tune our API during development, but are gracefully removed when we deploy the application to a live environment.
Precisely. Now we arrive at the heart of the matter, defining our endpoints.
Yes.
This is where we map incoming HTTP requests to specific actions within our application.
Right.
It's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
And this is where the minimal APIs truly shines, right? Those endpoint definitions are so concise and easy to grasp.
Absolutely. Take a look at this line, app.mapGet.
Hello, world.
In just a single line, we've defined a get endpoint for the root URL that returns that classic hello world message. It's a testament to how much you can achieve with minimal code.
Yeah, the elegance of that is impressive. What about the endpoints for our book service? How do those work?
They follow the same pattern of conciseness and clarity. App.mapGetBooks defines a Getty endpoint for books, which retrieves all books from our book service.
Oh.
Similarly, app.mapGet handles requests for a specific book identified by its ID.
I noticed these endpoints use type results and have with name and with OpenAPI attached to them. Are these essential components of endpoint definitions?
While they're not strictly mandatory, they add considerable value to our API design.
Okay.
Type results, as we touched on earlier, enhance the type safety and predictability of our responses, preventing potential mishaps down the line. With name provides meaningful names to our endpoints,
Right.
which aids in organization readability and documentation.
And with OpenAPI ties back to our Swagger documentation, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It allows us to enrich our API documentation with descriptions, tags, and other metadata, making it much more comprehensive and user-friendly.
So these seemingly small additions make our endpoints not just functional, but also well-documented and easily understood by others who might interact with our API.
You've summarized it perfectly. And finally, we have app.drun, which might seem unassuming, but is actually quite significant.
Is this what kicks off our application and makes it ready to receive those incoming requests?
Precisely. It's like opening the doors of our shop and inviting customers in. The entire program.cs file embodies that philosophy of minimal APIs. Keep it simple, focused, and expressive.
Right.
It empowers developers to communicate their intent clearly without getting bogged down in unnecessary ceremony.
It's a refreshing change from some of the more complex frameworks and architectures I've encountered in the past.
I think you'll find that minimal APIs can be incredibly powerful and efficient, particularly for building microservices and APIs where speed and agility are paramount. They provide a really solid foundation for creating lean and effective applications.
I'm already starting to brainstorm how I could apply these principles to some of my own projects. It's exciting to consider the possibilities.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like we've covered a lot of ground already,
Yeah, we have.
but I'm sensing there's still more to uncover.
Yeah, definitely.
We've laid a really solid foundation, but there's this whole world of possibilities within minimal APIs just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
Remember those middleware components that we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Those offer a powerful way to extend and customize the behavior of your application.
Middleware still feels a bit mysterious to me. What makes it so powerful?
Well, think of middleware as a collection of specialized tools or building blocks that you can plug into your API pipeline
Okay.
to handle specific tasks.
Got it.
You can use pre-built middleware provided by .NET, or you can even create your own custom middleware to address your unique needs.
So it's like having a toolbox full of specialized gadgets that I can use to enhance my API's functionality.
That's an excellent analogy. And as you delve deeper into middleware, you'll uncover even more ways to, like, fine-tune your minimal APIs
Right.
and tailor them to your exact requirements.
Yeah.
You might use middleware to handle authentication logging, caching, or even integrate with third-party services.
Wow. Okay.
The possibilities are vast.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the potential of minimal APIs. It's not just about writing less code. It's like a more deliberate and elegant way of building services.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this minimalist approach doesn't mean sacrificing power or flexibility.
Yeah.
Minimal APIs in .NET 8 provide a really robust and versatile framework for
Yeah.
creating everything from simple microservices to more complex and feature-rich applications.
I'm already starting to envision how I can apply this to my own projects. What would you say is the most important takeaway for someone who's just beginning their journey into the world of minimal APIs?
I think the key is to embrace that minimal philosophy, but not to feel limited by it.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to experiment and explore the different features and techniques that minimal APIs have to offer. Find what works best for you and for your projects.
So it's about striking that balance between simplicity and power, finding that sweet spot where our code is both elegant and effective.
Precisely. Minimal APIs empower you to focus on what truly matters, the core logic and functionality of your application. They strip away that unnecessary complexity, allowing you to express your ideas in a more concise and readable way.
If this deep dive has sparked a desire to learn even more, we've included some additional resources in the show notes.
Yeah.
You'll find links to articles and documentation that explore middleware in greater depth. Consider it like the next chapter in your minimalist coding adventure.
Those resources will provide you with a wealth of information to further your understanding of minimal APIs and middleware.
Great.
And remember, the journey of learning and exploration is ongoing.
Yes.
There's always something new to discover in this ever-evolving world of software development.
Oh, I feel like we've truly done a deep dive today. Thank you so much for guiding us through this fascinating topic.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I'm leaving with a newfound appreciation for the elegance and power of minimal APIs.
I encourage you to continue exploring and experimenting with this exciting approach to building web services.
Yeah.
You might be surprised at what you can achieve with a little bit of minimalism. Happy coding.
Thanks again. So it feels like we've covered so much ground already,
We have.
but I'm kind of sensing there's still more to explore with minimal APIs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We've definitely laid a solid foundation.
Yeah.
But there's still this whole world of possibilities within minimal APIs just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
Remember those middleware components we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
They offer a really powerful way to extend and customize the behavior of your application.
Yeah. Middleware still feels a bit mysterious to me. Could you elaborate on what makes it so powerful?
Sure. So think of middleware as like a collection of specialized tools
Okay.
or building blocks that you can plug into your API pipeline to handle specific tasks.
Okay.
You can use pre-built middleware provided by .NET, or you can create your own custom middleware to address your unique needs.
So it's like having a toolbox full of specialized gadgets that I can use to enhance my API's functionality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as you delve deeper into middleware, you'll uncover even more ways to fine-tune your minimal APIs and tailor them to your exact requirements. So for example, you might use middleware to handle things like authentication logging, caching,
Right.
or even integrate with third-party services.
Wow.
The possibilities are vast.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the potential of minimal APIs. It's not just about writing less code, it's about a more deliberate and elegant way of building services.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And remember, this minimalist approach doesn't mean sacrificing power or flexibility.
Yeah.
Minimal APIs in .NET 8 provide a robust and versatile framework for creating everything from simple microservices to more complex and feature-rich applications.
I'm already starting to imagine how I can apply this to my own projects. What would you say is the most important thing for someone to remember as they start exploring minimal APIs?
I think the key is to embrace that minimal philosophy,
Okay.
but not be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
Explore the different features and techniques that minimal APIs have to offer. Don't get too caught up in the hype focus on what makes your development process more efficient and enjoyable.
So it's about striking a balance between simplicity and power, finding that sweet spot where our code is both elegant and effective.
Precisely. Minimal APIs give you the tools to really focus on what truly matters. the core logic and functionality of your application.
Right.
And they strip away unnecessary complexity, allowing you to express your ideas in a more concise and readable way.
Well, I think we've truly done a deep dive today, and thanks so much for guiding us through this fascinating topic. I'm leaving with a newfound appreciation for the elegance and power of minimal APIs.
It's been my pleasure, and I encourage you to continue exploring and experimenting with this exciting approach to building web services. There's a lot of power in simplicity, and minimal APIs give you the tools to harness it. Happy coding.
Thanks again.